Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm going to be talking about the first episode of the show Binbogami Ga. Now this is something a little bit different here. This is my first ever anime review. I've been a fan of anime for about 14 years now, but for whatever reason there just haven't been very many shows lately that have really caught my interest. But I had some extra time today and I was just fooling around online and I stumbled across this show. I gave it a shot, and I ended up really liking it. So I'm officially adding Binbogami Ga to my list of reviews. Now with that out of the way, let me tell you a little bit about the basic premise of the show, and then we'll get into talking about the story and the characters. Binbogami Ga is focused around this girl who goes by the name of Sakura Ichiko, and in this world there is a power, an energy, whatever you want to call it, called fortune. And Sakura was born with an extraordinarily high amount of it. But as we learn early on in the story, she has this extraordinary amount of fortune because she absorbs it from other people around her. Now, this is a bit of a problem for the various gods that rule over this sort of thing, because it's gotten to the point where Sakura's good fortune is literally starting to upset the balance of the universe. So a Binbogami, or god of poverty, by the name of Momiji, is sent to track down Sakura and remove her excess good fortune. Now, all of this extra good fortune has basically meant that for her entire life, everything has gone Sakura's way. She's extraordinarily pretty. Everybody, all the boys in the school are absolutely crazy about her. She's rich. She's never really had to struggle for anything in her whole life. And as this show repeatedly reminds us, she also has big boobs. Well, anyway. This has caused Sakura, as I said, to be extraordinarily popular with the boys at school, but naturally, as to be expected of high school politics, because she's extraordinarily popular with the boys, all the girls hate her. Now, if this were a different sort of show, Sakura would probably pick up on this and be genuinely hurt by the fact that the other girls all secretly hate her. Well, Binbogami Ga is not your typical show. Sakura is perfectly aware of the fact that all the girls in the school hate her, and she just completely laughs at this. She finds it hilarious. She finds that the jealousy that other people have of her is just more proof that she's better than everyone else. And she absolutely revels in this. Now she goes around and she puts on a very nice facade of being nice to people and being very demure and humble and all of this other nonsense. But again, it's just that. It's a facade. Because everything has come to her in life on a silver platter, Sakura wholeheartedly believes that she is better than everybody else. Now, I do have to add one little caveat to what I've said about how everything in Sakura's life is good. Well, that's not entirely true. As we do learn in this episode, Sakura's parents just aren't around. They haven't been around her life at all, hardly. There's a scene where we see that they've missed countless numbers of her birthdays, and that the only person in the world that she really has any sort of true emotional connection with is her butler, who is named, oh geez, I'm blanking on his name. Sawarno, or Sawarnos, something like that. Anyway, I'm just going to call him the butler. I forget his name. But anyway, he's the only person in her life that she has any real kind of emotional connection with. And that's going to be important later on. But anyway, Momiji, the poverty goddess, shows up and tries to steal Sakura's good fortune, which of course brings the two of them in conflict. And despite Momiji being a goddess, Sakura is able to put up one heck of a good fight against her, and she has absolutely no interest in surrendering her excess good fortune, because, well, really, why would she? So she and Momiji sort of trade blows for a while, and Sakura, amazingly enough, even wins. And it's sort of interesting. She basically tells the butler to basically get rid of Momiji and, I guess, dump her out on the side of the road somewhere or something. And it's during this little time that the butler reveals to Momiji that Sakura really has no friends, and that he, in using anime plot show logic, is so happy that Momiji's around because obviously she's Sakura's friend. Now, what all this comes, and now I'm doing something I don't normally do in that I'm summarizing a lot of the plot. But, and again, this is not something I normally do, but I think in order for me to explain and review this properly, I have to really lay out what's going on here. And also, the duty of a first episode of any TV show is indeed to lay out the world in which the characters live in and the rules this world operates under. So, I'm kind of stepping away from a little bit from what I normally do a little bit, but in this case, I think it's vital. Anyway, what this all basically boils down to is that Momiji explains to Sakura that, one, if she takes away Sakura's excess good fortune, Momiji even shows her like a vision of what her life will be like if this happens, and basically Sakura ends up married to some loser and completely miserable, and also loses all of her money. So again, this is additional motivation for Sakura to fight Momiji at every turn. However, Momiji explains to Sakura, if you continue to go around like you are, just sucking the excess fortune out of everybody around you, then pretty soon the people around you will basically just start falling into ruin instead of you. And Sakura just is like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. Well, she doesn't care up until the point where her butler has a heart attack and is basically about to die on the operating table. And as he is the only person that she has any sort of emotional connection to, it's where Sakura says to Momiji, okay, Momiji even flat out tells her, like, basically he's been around you his whole life. You have literally sucked all of the fortune out of him. Because of you, your butler is going to die. So Sakura says to Momiji, okay, fine, you can take my excess good fortune. And Momiji's like, oh, well, nice to see you had reason. Now, if you're a savvy person, you realize that as soon as Momiji takes the excess good fortune out of Sakura, Sakura just bushwhacks her, runs off, and breaks the little canister that has the excess good fortune out by the hospital, thus restoring her butler to health and performing all these crazy miracles in the area of the hospital. And in the end of it, after the butler is better and he's recovering in the hospital, Sakura goes to sees him and basically tells him, yeah, you're fired. And this is, you're fired, go find a family, go live your life, be happy. And she's doing this because she cares about him, and she knows that if he stays around her, she'll just suck the fortune out of him again, and he'll die soon. And we do learn at the very end that, well, Sakura still has the problem that she's still sucking the excess good fortune out of the people around her. So Momiji's job is still far from finished. All right. So now that we understand the premise of this world, I can get into sort of my thoughts on the details here. This is, I think, now I should explain here that this is the first time I've ever come across it. Before today, I had never even heard of the show. I've not read any of the manga for it. I just came into the show completely cold, and I just ended up liking it. So let's get into my impressions from the first episode. And again, this is just totally going off what I have seen in this episode. This looks like it's going to be one of those sort of odd couple kind of comedy things with Sakura and Momiji just kind of butting heads with each other constantly. And, despite how much emphasis they put on how much they hate each other, I have the feeling it's just going to go down the somewhat traditional but eminently enjoyable road of, sure, they say that they hate each other, but they're actually really good friends. And, that's a time-worn kind of thing, but if it's done well, then I don't really have a problem with that. Now, let's talk about the character of Sakura, since I spent most of the episode talking about what she was doing. Sakura, she's actually, I think, a fairly interesting character. I like that she just completely revels in her good fortune. She uses it as a reason to look down on other people. And honestly, that is really kind of in keeping with what you would probably expect from somebody who's never really suffered much in the way of adversity in life, who's just had everything handed to them on a silver platter. Now, of course, it's very general, it's very easy, and honestly, completely unfair to say that just because someone has an easy life, that they're going to turn out that way. That people are more complicated than that. But I do like that they're not afraid to present us with a protagonist like Sakura, who is, when we first meet her, genuinely pretty unlikable. She really doesn't have much going for her in terms of reasons why I would like her. And Momiji is honestly pretty much the same way. If you pay attention to her during the episode, you see that she's lazy, she's really enjoys talking smack. She's very disrespectful to the people around her, even her own superiors. She's gross. You even see her like one time, just at one point, just sitting around picking her nose. And she's just sort of a crude, rude, lazy person, and I like that too. It really helps set up that Sakura and Momiji are in fact, in many ways, polar opposites of each other. But in many ways, they also have some very interesting similarities. Let's just look at their names. Sakura, of course, means cherry blossoms. But if your Japanese is a little bit more advanced, you might know that Momiji is actually the Japanese word for a maple tree. So we have right there, we have a little bit of a parallel between these two. And of course, another thing that we have is a parallel is that Momiji is on the extreme end of misfortune, while Sakura, of course, is on the extreme end of fortune. So while they are opposites, they are in fact also both parallels. And of course, as I've said, they're both honestly somewhat unlikable people. They're not really people that you'd want to be around, that you'd want in your life. Then again, I can't really think of very many people who would want a goddess of misfortune in their life for any reason at all. Actually, if I stop and think about it, in a way, forget the anti-Sakura. In a way, Momiji is more the anti-Belle Dandy. If you're familiar with the show Oh My Goddess, or the manga the series Oh My Goddess in its various forms, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But anyway, so let's talk a little bit more about the show. Let's talk about some of the show's strong points. One thing that we saw repeatedly in this episode were shoutouts to other anime. I didn't get all of them. I think that there were a few that came by that were just references to newer shows that I'm just simply not very familiar with. But during the course of it all, I spotted some pretty obvious references to Dragon Ball Z and Medica Box, and something that I'm pretty sure was a shout out to Soul Eater. So I do like that. I always enjoy those sort of things when I'm reading anime and manga, just so long as they don't go too crazy with it. And I think they did a pretty nice job in handling that here. Obviously, this is not a series that's meant to be taken seriously, so they can have a little bit more leeway in doing things like that. And here, they put it in there and they don't go too far with it, which, of course, is always a strong point. Anyway, let's see what else. Another thing that I kind of liked is, if you're kind of familiar with Japanese culture, there was a scene where Momiji comes up out of the toilet to try and get at Sakura. This is a reference to a very famous sort of Japanese urban legend ghost thing that goes by the name of Toilet Hanako. And believe it or not, there are actually at least a dozen that I can think of ghosts that in one way, shape, or form in Japan are related to toilets. I saw an article about this on a website not that long ago. I'll try and find it. If I can find it, I'll throw it up in the description. But anyway, overall, no, I'm not ready to go overall just yet. Some other things. First of all, there's some really nice action. Just the visuals between the fights, the way things are happening, are all done really well. The animation here is certainly pretty good, and a lot of the things that we see are just really creative. There's this part where Momiji, being a goddess of bad fortune is able to create literally a path of black cats through the air that she can run across to chase after Sakura. And I thought that was actually extremely creative and just genuinely funny. Let's see, what else? Well, I do like Momiji's character design quite a bit. She's got one arm is constantly in a bandage almost the entire episode, and this is a very small, very subtle way of sort of implying that she's a character associated with misfortune. Of course, the fact that she's got this little hat flag kind of thing on her head, which is sort of a traditional Japanese way of depicting that somebody is a ghost or a spirit, with the character for poverty written on it. Again, that's honestly, I'll say that's a little bit heavy-handed. I don't really like that too often when I see that in anime and manga, but here it works. And overall, I have to say that I do like the character designs for Sakura and Momiji. I actually like Momiji's character design a little bit more than I do Sakura's, simply because Sakura looks like 100 other pretty anime girls that I can think of. Momiji sort of looks like sort of that slightly grungy kind of weird chick that you see like hanging around the dorms in college doing weird things late at night, and sort of babbling about stuff from a Russian literature class that makes no sense to anybody but her. Okay, I might be being a little overly specific in regards to my personal college experience, but seriously, folks, if you've ever been to college, or heck, if you've even been to high school, you probably know somebody along those lines that I'm talking about. But anyway, let's get into. Oh yeah, as long as I'm talking about the positives of the show, I've mentioned the animation. I do have to give a word to the music. Both the music that we hear during the background scenes and the opening and the opening and ending theme songs are actually pretty enjoyable to listen to. There's quite a bit of English in both of them, but that's pretty much standard for J-pop. But it is reasonably decently done English, which is always a nice and refreshing change. And as I said, both the opening and the ending theme are just genuinely fun to listen to. Now, let's talk about some of the downsides here. Honestly, my main downside here, and maybe I'm being a little petty on this one, is that one of the big jokes the big secondary point of conflict between Sakura and Momiji, besides Sakura's excess fortune, is the fact that Sakura has big boobs and Momiji is pretty flat-chested. In fact, if I remember correctly, they even flat out state in the episode that Sakura is sporting F cups, and that Momiji is, well, pretty clearly still on the A side of things. My main problem here is that in doing this, they're basically really just sort of going for, one, a cheap source of comedy, and two, a cheap source of fan service. Now, let's face it, jokes about boobs are hardly anything new in anime and manga, but it just seems to me that so many shows these days, there's a character who's got the A cups, and then there's the character with the big boobs, and then the A cup character is either really angsty about not being well endowed, or very antagonistic towards the character who is endowed, and frankly, it just becomes a weak and lame excuse to show boobs, or to have characters groping boobs, or to make boob jokes in general. And, well, I honestly, that's just sort of, that's just sort of going for the lowest common denominator. Now, not that I'm opposed to fan service, all right? Let me be clear about that. I'm not. It's just, if you're going to do stuff like that, don't aim for the cheap seats. Don't go for the lowest common denominator. Do it a little bit more. Try and be a little more classy about it than that. Then again, it's not as if there aren't shows that are certainly far worse about it than this show is. I mean, for God's sakes, I've actually sat through a couple of episodes of Queen's Blade. But okay, we're gonna leave it at that. So let me see, what else? Yeah, I don't really know if this is something I can call exactly a criticism, but it's more like a thing about the plot that I just wasn't 100% sure on. Now, of course, we do see, over the course of the episode, Momiji shows Sakura what her life is going to be like if she takes away Momiji's good fortune. And it's a future where Momiji loses all of her money, ends up married to some loser, and is completely miserable. Where Sakura marries some loser and is completely miserable. I think I said Momiji there. Anyway, well, after it happens, after Momiji takes away Sakura's excess good fortune, she comes and checks on her later and says to her, okay, you've got the amount of fortune that a normal person would have. And Sakura doesn't really seem freaked out or worried in any really way, shape, or form about what's going to happen to her. So I'm kind of wondering, was Momiji just like screwing with Sakura that way? I mean, there's even a little some writing off to the side of when they said that this is supposedly the quote-unquote true future. So again, was that really the absolute written in stone future? Was Momiji just screwing with Sakura? And okay, I can understand why if Sakura had lost all of her fortune that she would end up that miserable loser. But here Sakura's fortune level has just been brought down to a normal. And while certainly very tragic things can happen to normal people, most people, they do okay in life. So again, I kind of wish that had been clarified a little bit. So let's wrap this up. Well, it's really hard to say too awful much based on just one episode. I do have to say that overall, let me put it this way. I had more fun watching this single episode of Binbogami Ga than I have had watching the dozen episodes of Ultimate Spider-Man that I have reviewed. And boy, that was just such a refreshing change. So yeah, that's the thing. While the storyline so far isn't super strong, there does the people who make the show, and I'm assuming the original author and the animation staff and all that other stuff, have taken time to make this more than a show. Well, thankfully, they've making it more than a show about boobs. They've made some genuine effort for there to be some character development, for there to be honest conflicts between the characters, and to go out there and do things a little bit differently than other shows. You know, to step away from the cookie cutter formula a little bit in some places. Other places, things are kind of along the, shop-worn lines, but that in and of itself is not necessarily bad. But at the end of the day, this is 20-some-odd minutes well spent. This is a fun, entertaining show, and it looks like it has the potential to be something, enjoyable and perhaps even memorable. I'm definitely going to be looking forward to the next episode. Anyway, folks, as always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter @HoosierJedi. And until next time, take care and have a good one.